Hello and welcome to Rubber Chicken with a Podcast in the Middle, the internet's only podcast exclusively devoted to the Monkey Island series of adventure games. I'm Alistair.
And I'm Gordon.
And in this episode, we're looking back at our memories of The Curse of Monkey Island.
Is that Monkey Island 3?
In Europe, yes. Box art, Monkey Island 3.
Monkey Island 3, but in Japan, of course, it was Monkey Island 7.
Yes.
Because there were all the unreleased games in between.
Yeah.
I'm referencing Final Fantasy there.
Yeah.
I'm sure everyone picked up on that. Anyway, how are you?
I am well, thank you. How are you?
I'm well. It's February as a time of recording in Australia, and it's really hot.
It's very hot, and I've turned my air conditioning off so that you can't hear it in the background of the recording, and that is not going to help.
I had the fan on. I was like, when I was testing the microphone. I got a new microphone this afternoon, by the way, which hopefully sounds good. And it's going to get us many new likes. Yeah, but I turned the fan off because it was interfering with the sound quality. So yeah, this is episode 28. Episode 27 was our infamous race / speedrunning episode.
Yeah.
I got after that, so that was kind of coming on the lead up to Christmas. In the weeks leading up to Christmas after that episode, I got rather obsessed with speedrunning the first 3 games, namely Secret.
Yes.
But there was one night where I had a few beers and I speedran all 3 of the first games in a row just to see how quickly I could do it. I got my speed for Secret quite down, and I compared it to the speeds online. And I actually did better than kind of the bottom-ranked speedster on speedrun.com or whatever it is. And I was quite proud of that. But anyway, we were planning on doing maybe in the months to come LeChuck's Revenge speedrun.
Yeah.
And my skills have since worn off. But after I lost that race, I got really obsessed with it. I'm sure you remember me
sending me many times that you'd done while I was on Christmas break. Yeah.
Well, you're doing something much more interesting and social, I'm sure.
And I did attempt one as efficient as I could be playthrough of at least part 1 of LeChuck's Revenge, but I know I made some critical error at some point. I can't remember what it was, but I did something in a very inefficient way, and I was like, well, I know that having practiced, I would have probably instantly lost at that point, but
I think LeChuck's Revenge was the most satisfying to speedrun to an extent, besides the end, when you have to fight.
Yeah.
That's probably a discussion for another time. Just a point of interest as to what I've been doing. I've been spending my time wisely. Speaking of spending your time wisely, you could be doing that by following us on our new Instagram.
Yes.
And if you're listening to this, I created this for some reason at the end of last year, but if you listen to this, you probably already follow it. So thank you. Big shout out to Lara, who is kind of the captain of our scurvy few, who often comments and likes and always has something nice and interesting to say. So thanks, Lara. Here's your shout out.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yes, that's Insta. Okay, a little piece of Monkey Island news. There was a new feature-length documentary on the development of Return to Monkey Island that came out, I think, about a week ago.
Yeah, so this is on the NoClip YouTube channel.
Yeah, and it's quite an enjoyable look into the production of that. And I think after you and I viewed it, it confirmed a few of our suspicions about the development of Return, and it also kind of confirmed a few of the interesting things, such as Ron and Dave being given kind of carte blanche control over everything, besides maybe a few references that Disney were worried about getting them sued.
Yeah.
But it also kind of confirmed to me that perhaps Ron and Dave didn't have that much of an idea going in about what they wanted their new Monkey Island game to be.
Yeah, I think it more or less synced up with our thoughts that, I don't know, maybe Ron thought that his idea for another game had already been done by the others or something, but Yeah, it seemed a bit like they went, hey, so yeah, we can make another Monkey Island. What do we do? And
How?
that was
Yeah.
kind of what we'd theorized was probably what had happened to
Yeah.
the lead up.
Yeah. And we've talked about that a lot. And it kind of just confirmed that kind of thing. But we'll put a link down below. Give it a watch. It is still very interesting. Speaking of very interesting and returning to Monkey Island, let's dispense with all of this and talk about a game that's very close to our hearts.
Yes.
The Curse of Monkey Island.
Released by the LucasArts Entertainment Company for Windows PC in 1997.
Yes. Now, hardly anyone listened to our old episode where we discussed
The Curse Gets
Curse.
Worse.
The Curse Gets Worse. So let's just talk about it. Kind of have a quick rake through of our history with the game.
Yeah, so back in 2022, we did retrospectives on Secret of Monkey Island and Monkey Island 2 in the lead up to the release of Return, but we didn't do one for Curse because we didn't think it was quite as relevant to do one.
No.
But we have wanted to do this since then, basically. Like, for a long time, we have been talking about it. And
Yeah. it feels
yeah,
right.
hardly anyone's listened to that Curse Gets Worse episode, so we're just going to redo the stuff where we talk about our memories of the game.
Yeah. So we were already fans of Secret and LeChuck's Revenge.
Yeah.
You know, we definitely finished Secret. I don't think we'd finished LeChuck's Revenge. No, we hadn't.
No.
But we played it a lot, but we hadn't finished it. I got up to part 3.
Yes.
So one morning we came down and this is my memory. On the table were printed out screenshots from the initial release of the original announcement of Curse.
Yeah.
That our dad had left out. And we
Yeah.
and brought ourselves downstairs on Saturday morning or whatever, and they were there. And I was like, oh, what is this? This must be a new Monkey Island game that's going to come out
Yeah.
for a system that we don't own.
Yeah, because
we
we'd speculated about Monkey Island 3. We didn't really have a good idea of how long it had been since Monkey Island 2, since we played it a few years after it came out, and we were little kids with a poor sense of the passing of time.
That's right.
But, yeah, one day, yeah, our dad had printed out these pictures, and I remember my first thought was, oh, they've made it look like a kid's cartoon. I don't like that.
That's funny because I don't remember that. I don't remember thinking that, and I don't remember you saying that.
Yeah.
I kind of remember thinking it looked good, and it kind of looked modern and slick, which is not something I necessarily go for now. I probably would have gone for a Thimbleweed Park look now.
Yeah.
But in most things, I probably don't need it to look up to the up and current. But that was current at the time. It's very 90s Disney.
Yeah,
which was the time.
Yeah, I'd really liked the way that Monkey Island 2 looked, and I think I was expecting more of the same. But
yeah,
LucasArts decided to go in a much more visually impressive, appealing direction for this new game, and really produce something of a quality, that could compete with, the animated films and stuff that were coming out in the 90s.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they made the right choice because this was kind of the game that rebooted the whole thing and captured everyone's imagination.
Yeah.
And this is the game that I met people both at the time and afterwards, and this was the one that they knew.
Yes.
Even later on when I got to high school, people knew, oh, do you like Monkey Island? And you'd say yes. And you'd say, oh, yeah, I love the bit with Kenny. And you think, oh, okay, so you like Monkey Island 3.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that was what Monkey Island became for people.
Yeah.
So,
and all the fan sites were made as a result.
Launched 1,000 fan
well,
sites, that's it. Well, yeah, and all the nice animated GIFs you could have, screenshot and clean up and put on your fan site. And there was the Monkey Island web ring, if you remember that.
Yeah, yeah.
You remember web rings? And anyway, so we were Mac kids
Yeah.
For whatever reason, in the 90s, we had actually a decent, I say decent performer. The performer is not considered a particularly decent Mac now. But it was like an Australian exclusive black Mac that we had. I don't know if you know about this. I've since researched it.
Yeah, you know more about it than I do.
Yeah, this Director's Edition Power PC performer, which was like a self-contained Mac that we had. And it served us relatively well for about 2 years before the hard disk failed,
Yeah.
I think. But we played a lot of games on it. Anyway, Monkey Island 3 was only released, I think when I listened back to our last episode on this, was released for Mac in 2017, 2018.
Something like that, yeah.
Monkey Island 3 was not released on Mac in 1997 when it was released, but I didn't understand how things like that worked at the time.
Yeah.
I believe I asked Santa for Monkey Island 3. There's a cute little detail for you. And he gave it to me.
Yes, indeed.
And we come from a small coastal town in Australia. We don't live there anymore. We live in Sydney. And we'd gone on a big family holiday, massive long family holiday to the UK with our Anglophile parents.
Yeah.
And the final month was an extravaganza in London. You were 10. No, sorry, you were 8.
Yeah.
I was 10.
Yeah.
You just turned 8.
Just turned 8, yeah.
Yeah. And everywhere, in every big computer game store, HMV, whatever they had there, were walls of The Curse of Monkey Island.
Yeah.
And like cutouts and posters and in the windows of shops.
Yeah.
This is how I remember it, but this may be a false memory. And I'd love to have a photo of like the promo for Curse of Monkey Island. I believe on the website you could order T-shirts from LucasArts.
That would be cool to have
But
now.
only at the time, yeah. I believe so. And like Monkey Island was big, but they didn't merchandise it to its full extent like they would like a Star Wars movie.
Yeah.
But I remember thinking that would be cool.
Yeah.
So I asked Santa for Curse, and we got it.
Yeah.
I unwrapped it. Go on.
I definitely remember being in an HMV store in London in late 1997, and there was a big pink or pink-purple stand. That's the box cover colour of Curse of Monkey Island with lots of copies on it. I think it had the cover image of Guybrush climbing up the mast towards the chuck.
It did. That was the main image.
And I remember that being a big display. And as they talk about in that Return documentary, Monkey Island was popular in Europe, so it made sense for them to market it in a pretty... I don't know what it was marketed like in the US, but it was the kind of place where you probably could put up a big Monkey Island stand in an HMV and people would go, "Oh, Monkey Island, I've heard of that. There's a new one.
Yeah.
I'm going to get it. Yeah, this looks very glossy and cool and nice." Yeah.
Well, you remember how striking... I mean, I've got that on my shelf, that box that I got in 1997. I'm looking at it now, and I remember how striking that image was of Guybrush climbing up the rigging and Elaine and LeChuck in the... what do you call it? The crow's nest.
Yeah.
And like that's never in the game, but similar to the LeChuck's Revenge box art, it's like this awesome, dramatic image. Yeah, that really kind of reeled you in, and it did have that like sunset pink tone to it. Yeah. It was the game of Party Proportions, or was that Escape?
That's Escape.
It's turned sideways on my shelf. Sorry, but it's the sword sharper than your wit box. I think that was the third title. Anyway, yes, I got it, and we were in London, so we didn't have access to a computer. We didn't come back until January, and secondly, when we did get home, we didn't have a PC on which to play it. Yeah. But our dad attempted to install virtual PC on the Performer, and tried to get Curse running. Do you remember this?
Yes.
And I was so excited. I was like beyond excited to play Monkey Island 3, and it just didn't work.
No.
It got to the screen where you would select which difficulty you wanted, Monkey Island or Mega Monkey, and you could slowly move the cursor to
Drag the
box
cursor
and
across
click
the
it.
screen.
And I remember seeing, and it would be like 5 minutes in between the animation changing
Yeah.
on this emulated version of Windows 95 or 98. I can't remember. I guess 95. And and I was like, oh, what is this? And like eventually I saw it was a knife, because it's got like this animated blur on it as it goes into the sign. And the music's going did it did it did it and then it cut to the part where the beginning of the cutscene is like a map of the Tri-Island area as it was now known, and it gets kind of blown away in the wind. And I remember it starting to blow away in the wind, and that's when we gave up
Yeah.
and realised that this wasn't going to be a feasible way to play it.
Yeah.
But as I said, like I personally was beyond excited to play the new Monkey Island game because I was such a fan of the series at this point. And it was like such a blow not to be able to play it.
Yeah. I remember us poring over the manual because this came.
Well, that was the only kind of outlet, right?
Yeah, as computer games did back then, it came with a big, glossy, full color manual, and
beautiful. That was like written by an author.
Yeah, and it told you about the history of the series. It had all this comedic stuff as if the game were an action game with different weapons and stuff in it.
Yeah.
It was this really lavishly produced.
So much taller.
Yeah.
And it had a walkthrough for part 1, which I made sure I never read because I wanted to figure it out myself.
Yeah, and introduce the characters.
It made it exciting. And that was a real, when, I don't really talk to people about it, but you read about it online, and people in like the 70s say if you were a Doctor Who fan in the 70s, you didn't have it on video to watch because it didn't exist. So you had novels and things or pictures in a magazine, and that was your outlet, when you couldn't watch the show. And that was really kind of our experience with this. And that was the 90s, and we're both very much 90s kids. So we did experience that kind of thing to an extent. Media wasn't as widely available back then. And this was downloading did exist, but you and I, that was beyond us at our age with things like that. And so this manual was really the outlet for Monkey Island 3 for a long time. And we didn't have a PC until 2001, I think, which is after we got it after Escape came out, if you remember.
Yes, and this is why I have this theory that I may have finished even Escape before I finished Monkey Island 2, but I'm not sure.
Oh, I hope not. I hope that's not the case. So our first experience playing this game was we went to when your parents have a party and you have to go, but it's boring because you're like the kid. When you're at a certain age as a kid and your parents have like a grown-ups party and you have to like go and play with their kids or whatever while they go and do whatever adults do. I wouldn't know. And we played. Do you remember? I don't think you remember, with our dad's friend's son on their computer. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. I do vaguely remember this.
In like their bedroom, in like his parents' bedroom, where the family PC was.
Yeah.
And we got kind of part way through part 2, and we got up. I remember the puzzle that really stumped us was we didn't know how to get onto the beach past the Cabana Boy. We couldn't figure it out.
Yeah.
And that's the point. We played it for a good few hours, I think. And I think this guy who we played it with was very kind to sit with these two excited primary school children, because he was probably 18 or something.
Yeah, he was quite a bit older than us. Yeah, probably
Yeah.
a good 10, probably 10 years older than me, nearly, or something like that. Yeah.
Good guy. But
Yeah.
I remember he was big into Full Throttle. He had Full Throttle on like the proper big box.
Yeah,
and I remember
right.
thinking that was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, and it was like Full Throttle was like the cool game, like the cool motorcycle game.
Yeah.
And it's like the cool older kids play.
Yeah,
because it's violent and stuff.
Yeah.
And like, we only ever played a demo of that until years later.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was our first kind of foray into Curse. And later on, our uncle used to come to visit, because as I say, we lived in a small town up the coast. And the family would come to visit us because we lived in a picturesque town where they'd like to stay and go to the beach.
Yeah.
But you and I, nerdy kids who didn't really like to go to the beach as much, we'd get our uncle to bring his laptop with us.
Yeah, his work laptop.
His work laptop. And we would play Curse on it.
Yeah.
And that was the first time I finished Curse. It was on his work laptop.
Yeah, I have very distinct memories of sitting in the back room, the library as we called it at our old house, playing Curse of Monkey Island on our uncle's work laptop. And our uncle's left-handed as well, so
we had to play it all left-handed, And I remember the refresh rate wasn't that great on the animation.
Yeah.
But, it didn't matter.
Yeah.
That was the first time I ever remember skipping breakfast, as I was so involved in finishing the last part of Curse.
Yeah.
Was that I forgot to have breakfast. And I was like, oh my God, I've not had breakfast today for the first time ever. It turns out it was all right. Didn't set me up for a lifetime of bad eating habits. That was everything else. So yeah, that was kind of our personal history of Monkey Island. Well, that was mine anyway, and you and I kind of both did it together.
Yeah.
And years later, we would get a PC, obviously, with I'm still on Mac, but with Scum VM, it's easy. I had it on this afternoon. As I said, I was speed running it last year. It's just so much easier to get running now, obviously.
Yes. Yeah.
Because it's built in Scum. The last foray into Scum. So yeah, that's Curse. All right, bye. So you want to get into the meat of the game?
Yeah, there were a couple of things I wanted to mention, thinking just about those memories. One was, I'm just looking at the manual now, and when it has the list of characters, when Wally appears, there's very low resolution pictures of the Voodoo Lady and Wally, and a not very high one of Elaine. But it says, Bloodnose the Pirate, the cartographer, formerly known as Wally. But there is a line break in the middle of the word formerly. And as a kid, I didn't understand what that meant. So I read it as the cartographer for Merle, known as Wally. And I remember as a kid being like, who the hell is Merle? What is... When was... I don't remember Wally having anything to do with someone called Merle in LeChuck's Revenge.
That's like a Mondegreen, right? They call it like song lyric.
It's like Hey Dean Yeager in Ghostbusters, right?
Yeah, Hey Dean Yeager.
Yeah, I remember that, and I remember reading over this manual just over and over and over again, thinking it was so cool, and being very intrigued by what it said about the ending of Monkey Island 2. Guybrush ended up hexed by LeChuck, believing himself to be a little boy trapped in the Carnival of the Damned. And I remember thinking, what does that mean? Well, I don't remember that. Of course, we hadn't finished Monkey Island 2.
No. The Carnival of the Damned, that's a cool name, despite whether you like that in the canon or not. It is a cool name.
Yeah, so...
Speaking of, I remember my friend and I, take from this what you will, we would usually play Curse at his house. He was a fan of all of the games, 1 to 4. But like I would go there often and like stay the night, and we'd play in the morning. The next day, we'd always get up early and play through Curse, and we'd play a part each. And then, because we're kind of hankering for more MI, we would play LeChuck's Revenge.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that means, but it was kind of like there was like a social aspect to this game, like because
Yeah.
it was funny. It was
Yeah.
like watching a funny movie together.
Yeah, exactly. And it was the same for us playing it. I think that's one of those things that was especially brought to the fore in this game with the writing and the voice acting because they're both so good.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the kind of thing we've mentioned before where we still say stuff from this game, like
Yeah.
to each other, and or I think about stuff that I would say if other people would get it, but I don't say it out loud.
Yeah.
Because the writing is so strong.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess that leads to why this game is so good. I mean, I think this game is great. Some people don't rate it. And I probably did go through a brief time where I thought that only 1 and 2 were like the true games. And
Yeah.
that's very much coming from like, I'm like a heavy metal fan, and that's very much a heavy metal fan's kind of crappy bullshit opinion about stuff where you can't like stuff that's not, it didn't come out in the 80s, so it's not good. Oh, that doesn't have this specific bass player on it, so...
Yeah.
But I think that was very short-lived. And I remember at uni citing Curse as my favourite game because I was asked what my favourite game was by a professor.
Wow.
And I said Curse because I thought it would be the one that people knew about. And he laughed heartily and said, well, yeah, the retro thing's coming back in. And I was like, what? It's not that old. The game wasn't even 10 years old.
Yeah,
at this point.
it wouldn't have even been 10 years by that point. Yeah.
I was like, people remember Curse, right? That's the one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or maybe it has the coolest sounding name.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember when we initially saw these pictures when I was a kid. At first, I didn't like that they were made to look like a cartoon, but then when we played it, I actually really liked the way it looked. Definitely, when I was in my 20s, there was a time when I got very negative about Curse for a while.
I guess maybe you and I were playing off each other with that era.
Yeah, and then I kind of went back and replayed it and really came to appreciate just how good it is because this may not be my favorite
things.
Yeah. May not be my favorite in the series. While I don't love it as much as the first two, this is still, it's the best one in the series after the first two by a massive margin.
Right?
It is still one of the best adventure games ever made.
Absolutely. So it's like, is it by Ron Gilbert? No. Oh, is it still good? Absolutely, it is.
Yeah, and
yeah.
And this game, Secret innovated massively in terms of, what an adventure game could be. And this game was a huge innovation in terms of how a company could bring like Hollywood levels of production value to a computer game.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of its greatest achievement.
And it was very copied.
Yes.
Was very, as Secret was very influential on like those pixely adventure games.
Yeah.
Curse was just as influential, and I would argue still is.
Yes.
A lot of the games that they make now and have in the last 20 years, they're trying to look like Curse because people they think people want that or people want that. Like Runaway, that was the one.
Yeah, massively influential on European adventure games. Runaway was a Spanish game, right? Yeah. And lots of games that were produced in Europe and stuff that was produced in the 2000s. Like, I've never played them, but like the Deponia games and stuff like that. I literally remember seeing those and thinking, is this just a Monkey Island ripoff? Like, I don't know anything about them.
Well, I think they kind of are. They're very heavily inspired by them.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there'll probably be adventure game fans out there who really like some of those games, and some of them are probably really good, and I would like to be recommended those games.
Yeah.
Because I'd be keen to play them. So I'm not besmirching them, but I'm saying that it was definitely influential on that kind of thing. To a large extent, and as you say, you didn't like the graphic style on initial viewing, but now I couldn't imagine it any other way, and I actually really, really love it, especially the way some of the environments are rendered.
Yeah.
Blood Alone is just beautiful.
Yeah. I
Mm.
think I think the from a visual design perspective, it's a
Mm.
massive achievement, and yeah, it was groundbreaking and genre defining
Defining,
in
yeah,
that
absolutely.
respect.
Well, this is where we talk about is the story that great? Maybe not, but it doesn't matter. But it's got stacks of atmosphere, and that really
Yes.
comes from those things. It comes from the graphics, it comes from the writing, it comes from the music, it comes from the sound design. You know,
Yeah.
the sound of the bats that fly away when you walk past them. You know, the sound of the organ on Blood Island, the
Yeah.
seagulls.
Yeah, and the funny writing, yeah, and the voice acting as well.
Yeah, and I always argue, this is why you come back to these games, because you like spending time on Plunder Island. I know
Yeah.
that sounds a bit sad. You like spending time exploring the spooky hotel on Blood
Yeah.
Island and
Yeah.
going into the crypt and things. Like, these aren't just linear computer game environments that you visit and then never see again. This is like I don't want to sound too ridiculous here, but this is like a world that
Yeah.
you're entering.
Yeah.
And it rendered so nicely, even if it's in this kind of very stylized fashion, because
Yeah.
it's been done so nicely.
Yeah. And there's a
you
massive amount of optional dialogue that was all professionally recorded and everything. You can spend
Yeah,
so long speaking to the Barbers and to Captain
Yeah.
Blondebeard and to Slappy Cromwell and to Palado.
and the comedy is tight.
yes.
You know what I'm talking about when I refer to that. You know which game I'm referring to.
Yeah.
Maybe the comedy not being so tight, but it.
Mm.
You don't have to do all those things. You can talk to Van Helgen about all of his ridiculous jaunts away as a pirate, but you don't have to do any of that. You can just walk up to him and slap him if you figured that out by accident or if you played the game before. But there's all this added stuff that you can kind of dig into, and that gives it that replay value, I think.
Yeah.
Even if the puzzles are all the same.
Yeah.
And there are memorable characters as well. New memorable characters.
Yes.
Arguably, possibly the most memorable characters in the game, in the series, besides Guybrush himself. I would argue. You know, you've got your big ones. You know, Stan, Elaine, Guybrush, Wally, but you know, the Barbers. The Flying Welshman.
Yeah.
Good Soup. The whole mini Good Soup and Charles de Goulash, all that stuff. These are memorable characters. These are interesting, well written, characters that actually add to the world and don't just feel like characters in an adventure game to me.
Yeah, they're comedy characters, but they feel like as you say, they feel like real characters, that they're not just there to spout off one-liners or anything like that. And
no.
You can have...
They don't feel like they're just there. You know, like Slappy Cromwell is there, right?
Yeah.
But you don't have to talk to him at all.
No.
But he adds a little bit to the world.
Yeah.
And you don't have to step through 60 lines of dialogue in order to unlock a puzzle that he's involved with. He's just there. And it's funny. There's guys on this island rehearsing a play and for pirates. And it's silly, but it's fun.
Yeah. And as I said, I think that the voice acting contributes to that massively. Obviously, the big one is Dominic Armato as Guybrush. You know, for a guy who was 19 when he first played Guybrush, absolutely, nails the voice of this character.
Oh, yeah.
He's very...
Well, it's the
very
sound
kind
of curse.
Yeah, he can be kind of courageous and adventurous and romantic and stuff, but is often very, very sarcastic and dry, and his delivery is so funny.
Yeah, he's great. It's just as good as anything.
Yeah.
In any animation ever, or better.
Yeah.
A swashbuckler, a rogue.
Yeah.
A man who can hold his breath for 10 minutes.
Yeah, and his dialogue fits the way the character is handled and appears visually as well in that game absolutely perfectly.
Yeah, it is perfect casting for the way that character is drawn and written.
Yeah.
And I would argue for Escape as well, but when he goes back and does the first two games, it doesn't work for me as well because it's not written with him in mind. Kind of thing.
Yeah. I've often felt that Dom's delivery, especially in this one, reminds me a lot of Weird Al Yankovic and some of his comedy, especially in his fake interviews. There's a lot of the dialogue reminds me of that. And some of it reminds me a bit of like the early kind of classic era of very well written Simpsons as well.
Well, I think that was probably a big influence at the time. Like, this is all Weird Al and The Simpsons are both big American zeitgeisty things in the 90s.
Yeah.
The Simpsons clearly more so, but they would be influences on this kind of humor, I think, and this kind of voice acting. I think Dom kind of reminds me a little of the voice acting of Aladdin. I would cite Aladdin a lot as I would think probably the closest kind of animated thing to this. I was a big fan of Aladdin on release and watched it a lot on home video, and I think it kind of had a similar tone to this.
Yeah,
and I would be surprised if Aladdin wasn't a big influence on the style and tone of Curse. During development.
Yeah, I would think so.
And that whole Disney Renaissance, but that was the big one with like the genie, like the larger than life, funny, magical character, which is LeChuck in a way.
Yes. Yeah.
Let's talk. So LeChuck is voiced again perfectly by Earl Boen.
Yeah.
His greatest role, Terminator aside.
Yeah.
R.I.P. Earl Boen.
Yeah, perfectly cast as LeChuck in exactly the same way as he's like a Saturday morning cartoon villain. He's like when a video game like Super Mario Brothers or Sonic the Hedgehog became a cartoon, and you think of the way that like King Koopa or Dr. Robotnik are done in those 80s cartoons. He's like that, but he's still in a game, but he's presented in that way. And again, it's perfect for what this game is trying to do, and Earl Bowen's voice performance is completely perfect for that.
Absolutely. And they are able to somehow marry this kind of sinister edge with this very comedic edge.
Yes.
So, and there's a couple of things in it that I remember as a kid, they would always make me think, like he says, "Prepare the flaming voodoo cannonball." And I'm like, is this something I should know about already?
Yeah.
Or when it's later on and he's on Monkey Island, he's like, "Where's Dingy Dog?" And then this Dingy Dog character comes in and he wants more coleslaw. And I'm like, I'm slightly too young to understand what this is all having a go at.
Yeah.
I since get it.
Yes.
But at the time I was like, oh, is this something I've missed, like from the end of Monkey Island 2?
Yeah.
Or was there something in between? Or, I mean, these are all just like pop culture kind of jokes.
Yeah.
But for some reason it works with Earl Bowen's delivery and the way that character's written. And I'm thinking there's the cutscene where he comes back to life and he's murdered the two guys who were trying to salvage the Battle of Plunder Island.
Yeah.
And then he sweeps up the mast with in like this big trail of flame, and he kind of is drawn before your eyes as this new demon pirate. It's awesome, man.
Yeah,
I love that.
I would never amazing. Yeah,
skip that cutscene. I love that.
Yeah, and it's like you say, it's very funny, but it's a very dark sense of humor in some places, and there are a lot of jokes about death and mutilation and maiming and murder and all this sort of thing, which again makes me think of the Weird Al style of comedy as well, where there's a lot of like comedy violence.
This very much ties into like that Weird Al thing. Like Weird Al talks about people people say my songs are great for car trips and stuff, but like the songs are incredibly violent.
Yeah.
I had my son singing along to Weird Al, like these songs about like they were satire, but about like gun violence and things.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know the song. We're both
Yeah.
big fans, and that's the same with The Simpsons. Like there's this very
Yeah.
dark satirical edge to it.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to torture Monkey Island to being a satire. Like there are like some cultural references that it makes or it might make fun of, but it does have that kind of violent edge to thing. It doesn't shy away, even though it may be produced kind of for a younger audience. It doesn't shy away from things like death or violence or think about when the pirates are plunged into the molten lava and then come out as skeletons and then scream for the next dip in the roller coaster.
Yeah.
And like I remember as a kid thinking like, oh, are they dead now? Like,
yeah.
you know, they've like, this is like magic and body horror and this violent stuff that's dealt with in this game. For kids.
That's 90s gross out humor as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, thank God we had the 90s, right? Because like there was some cool stuff. So the other major player we have is Elaine.
Yeah.
Voiced by Alexandra Boyd. Definitely her best vocal performance as Elaine.
Yeah.
Definitive. She knocks it out of the park. I think she's a perfect Elaine. She's hardly in it. Elaine is hardly in this game.
Only has a handful of lines in the entire game, but her presence is the whole way through.
Absolutely, because she's the driving factor.
This is one of those things as well where she's perfectly cast for the way Elaine is written in this game, and especially when you go back and do the special editions, Elaine speaks in a very American idiom that Alexandra Boyd's accent doesn't fit in the first two games, special editions, but yeah, all of her.
It's where I argue that Charity
here is
James
perfect.
does a great job.
Yeah.
And, you know, is just as good an Elaine, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Would be fine. I would be fine if she was cast as Elaine.
Yeah.
Monkey Island 200.
Yeah. I think all of the voice casting of the existing characters was, you know,
well, it was
pretty
a clean
much
slate, right?
Perfect.
So it had to be voice acted to be cutting edge. They had a clean slate to cast everyone, and then they knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, like Pat Penny is absolutely perfect as Stan, and obviously
Definitely.
like Denny Delk as Murray.
Oh, sorry, that's. I
definitive.
was going through memorable characters, and I didn't mention Murray.
Yeah, Murray introduced in this game, but became one of almost like the mascot of the series.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And yeah, like the most identifiable thing.
Yeah, Leilani Jones as the voodoo lady again.
Yep.
Definitive. Neil Ross, I think, is very good as Wally again in this.
Yes.
Voice casting didn't work quite as well when it was retrospectively applied to LeChuck's Revenge. Again, that's not on him. It's because, you know, these characters were written so perfectly for the voice actors in this game in particular.
Yeah, it's all matched up so well.
Yeah.
And directed well. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Adds to the atmosphere. I guess the thing people might dislike about the game is the plot. The plot is basic. For me, it works because it's still gallivanting around the Caribbean. And I kind of like the fact that even though it's a follow-up to LeChuck's Revenge, they, at least initially, don't care about that and just launch straight into this is the new adventure, and it's this hapless pirate hero who goes and is trying to save his girlfriend from a curse. It's kind of like the very basic ideas we were talking about in our What Would We Do episode, where it's just like, just come up with something and then enjoy the ride. You don't have to be saying anything particularly grand. It's like, who cares? Like, we get to experience these pirate locations. We get to solve puzzles. There's a bit of a story. There's some spooky moments. There are a couple of thought-provoking moments maybe towards the end. But other than that, it's kind of all good fun. And it doesn't matter that much. Not that I need to defend it. But
Yeah, it's summed up in
I just like it.
Yeah, it's summed up in a few seconds of Guybrush dialogue in the opening monologue of the game, where he says that Elaine's his love and that LeChuck had an evil plot to marry Elaine that he had foiled, in a previous adventure. And they wisely followed up on that as one of the unresolved plot elements from Monkey Island 2. I think in that interview from the couple of years ago, in the 25th anniversary of Curse, I think it was Jonathan Ackley, one of the co-leads in this game, said, "We didn't really think that people would want to start off with demonic kids in an amusement park." So,
wow. How times have changed.
Yeah. So that's how it starts.
That's a great decision, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And that's hilarious, the start of that game. I remember always thinking it was funny. I still think it's funny.
Yeah.
I've heard it a lot.
And we've mentioned this many times, but you have that little nod to the end of Monkey Island 2 with Guybrush floating in a bumper car. How did he escape from the amusement park? Doesn't matter. He just did.
Doesn't matter. This is a new one.
Yeah, and he's got balloons in his pocket, but...
I love the image. It's like, this is a pirate game. Oh, but this is the hero writing his diary, sitting in a bumper car, floating in the middle of the ocean. Like that's a brilliant image.
Yes, yeah, and it perfectly, as I said before, it perfectly sums up the series. That image encapsulates Monkey Island in kind of one picture. I think,
definitely.
I think the shortcoming with this is because the ending tries to explain some of the ending of Monkey Island 2, and it never needed to.
Well, shall we talk about the ending while we're here?
Yeah, because I think there are two kind of... It's very difficult to criticize this game. As I say, it's one of the best adventure games ever made. I would say the only things I would criticize are it's a little bit of a kind of soft reboot of Secret of Monkey Island. It reuses some concepts from that, especially in sword fighting.
I'll get to that.
But we'll get to that. And the other thing is, the fact that it sort of tries to explain parts of the end of Monkey Island 2, but not all of it. And the ending in general is a bit disconnected from the majority of the plot of the game, and it doesn't spoil it or anything, but it feels a bit tacked on, and it feels a little bit like it wasn't necessary.
Well, the plot of Monkey Island 3 is kind of wrapped up at the end of part 4 when you rescue Elaine.
Yeah.
Because you've gone through all this stuff, you've learned all this stuff, new information about LeChuck, which I'm a little bit dubious about. Doesn't really matter. And then you rescue Elaine, and then they're like, "Oh crap, what do we do now?
Yeah,
we gotta, this isn't where you can end the game because doesn't feel like the natural ending.
No,
we have to have the big finale." And then at that point, it transitions into a very much a sequel to LeChuck's Revenge.
Yeah, which is weird because it's been avoiding doing that for so long.
Exactly, and it felt like this fresh game for so long, and then it's like, okay, now it's LeChuck's Revenge 2.
Yeah.
So I think there are bits of the end that I like, and there are bits that I don't. And the bit I always get stuck on is that I don't really like, and no one really likes this part, is the big dialogue dump with LeChuck at the end.
Yes.
Where it's just like, oh man, how do we explain everything? Let's just have a huge conversation with LeChuck that you can kind of skip in a way by and this is how you solve the puzzle of the huge conversation, is just by being petulant and not listening to him. And he curses you.
Yeah, and to the game's credit, you can cut that conversation short very early.
Yeah,
you don't have to go through LeChuck's whole explanation of the crew of the Elaine and the map pieces and Big Whoop and why he built the amusement park and all this stuff.
Yeah, and it's just unnecessary.
Yeah.
I like visually the idea of the spooky carnival, and I know whenever I've been to a carnival since, I've like sent you a photo of whatever and been like, oh look, I'm like you picked the anchor,
Yeah.
you know, and it's okay. The bit I really like is and if you had to do a sequel to LeChuck's Revenge, it's the bit at the end of the very end of the game where you're on the roller coaster and
Yeah.
you're flashing through all of these bits of Guybrush's adventure. And I think this is something they needed to kind of have a second run at. It's a bit like LeChuck's obsessed with Guybrush,
Yes.
and I think you've discussed this previously. It'd be more interesting if that was fleshed out because we're seeing these scenes from Guybrush's life, and and like the search for Big Whoop and things. So we've got like LeChuck and Wally being tortured, and we've got like the search for Big Whoop, like the Captain Marley and his crew, and then we've got like a giant monkey, you know.
Yeah, and
It's like
we've got Herman and the three-headed
got
monkey
Herman.
and the dead guy
Yeah,
on
yeah.
Monkey Island as
on
well.
Monkey Island, yeah. And so it's like, was there a concept kind of here where LeChuck has built this roller coaster because he's obsessed with the hunt for Guybrush, which is a bit Monkey Island too.
Yeah.
Kind of this whole idea of LeChuck's obsession with finding Guybrush, which is very Darth Vader on the hunt for Luke. And I like the scene. I like seeing the like Monkey Island 2 rendered in Monkey Island 3's graphics and things like
Yes.
that. And I like the creepy because I love those like animatronic rides. You know, I do love Pirates of the Caribbean and the Haunted Mansion and all that stuff when I've been on it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really cool idea. It does kind of very much devolve into a boss fight.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like there might have been a better way. It's famously known that it's rushed. The end of development of Curse was rushed. And I assume it was around this point where they realised they didn't know what to do to finish off the game. And I've tried to figure out myself, like, what would I do to finish off this game?
Yeah.
And I think you probably have to figure something out earlier because, as I say, the plot of Curse ends at that point, and then you're kidnapped and it goes on this other tangent. I don't know.
Yeah.
Do you have any ideas about how you'd end Monkey Island 3?
Well, I was thinking as you were saying, yeah, like I think the ending of The Curse of Monkey Island, yeah, its biggest weakness is LeChuck explaining all this stuff and trying to tie the plots of the first two games together, which doesn't work and doesn't make sense and contradict stuff from the first two games, which is partly a joke, but partly also like they're trying too hard to turn it into this big continuous thing. And I think also just the fact that it doesn't address some stuff, like is LeChuck really Guybrush's brother? Like it was a joke or whatever, but they never addressed any of it, you know? So it's kind of like, it's weird what they chose to talk about and what they didn't. I think, yeah, the idea of the roller coaster as like, well, in the Monkey Island version of Disneyland, where they show events from the Disney movies, well, what would be in the Monkey Island version of that? It would be scenes from the games, but it's like messed up stuff like Guybrush being tortured or like a dead guy hanging from a rope and stuff like that, you know?
Yeah.
And that in itself is quite...
It's not the worst idea.
No, it's quite clever, and it does suggest kind of like a blurring of the boundary between is any of this real or not. And Curse kind of wants to say, oh yeah, it's all real. Anything that seemed an illusion was just an illusion or whatever. Anything that was confusing was just magic. Guybrush literally gets turned back into a little kid like he did at the end of Monkey Island 2. Like they're really trying to say, you know, this is what was going on kind of thing to some extent. But yeah, I think if you were going to do the ending differently, obviously you still need to have LeChuck, but I think don't go back to Monkey Island. As much as I like
don't set it on Monkey Island.
Yeah, as much as I like the image of the monkey head and its surrounds being turned into this amusement park and kind of
that looks great.
It visually, I really like that image, and the idea of like someone turning it in more fully into this kind of evil tourist attraction is kind of cool
Yeah.
and fits with the series, but making Big Whoop and the monkey head the same thing is like Darth Vader built C-3PO. Like, it makes
Yeah.
the concepts feel smaller and a bit boring. I think,
Well, it's kind of what they did anyway, man.
yeah, and that's what I was going to say is the roller coaster at the end of Curse. Ron and Dave kind of redid that with the Melee
Well,
Island as an animatronic attraction at
this is
the
the
end of
argument I've
Return.
made,
And it's,
that
yeah,
like
it's like,
that the end of Revenge, the end of Return has been dealt with by the end of Curse in a way.
yeah, arguably in a less obvious way
Yeah.
as well. But I was going to say, if you were to make the ending of Curse fit together more, yeah, obviously you have to deal with LeChuck. LeChuck has to come back and everything, but don't have Monkey Island, don't have the monkey head. No one cares about Big Whoop. Big Whoop was never important. I think you
if
would
you
bring...
want this, if you're in love with this amusement park idea, have it as like it's an abandoned Good Soup project.
Yeah, you
in
could do something
a corner of Blood Island,
Yeah.
and then I don't know, LeChuck brings it to life to
Yeah,
to
yeah.
torture
Maybe
Guybrush.
you go back to another one of the Good Soup resorts or something.
Yeah.
I was thinking what you would do if you wanted to tie this together, because you would have something involving LeChuck and King Andre, because King Andre wants the diamond back or something like that. And
Yeah, that would be cool. We've had all this stuff with LeChuck's like new backstory as well.
Yeah,
with the Good Soup family history and things. So you could tie it into that as well, maybe.
Yeah, my only fear with this is it turns into like a Tales-esque thing where it's like guys on ships waving their fists at each other, which you don't, and which happen in Return as well, admittedly, with LeChuck and Madison. So you wouldn't want it to turn into that. But I think what you're saying, like, if there was a Good Soup theme park or something, and look, you're fighting LeChuck there, maybe,
maybe he uses his demon powers to possess it or something. Or he has to use he takes the diamond just as you're about to rescue Elaine. LeChuck takes the diamond because that's the thing he needs to plug into the amusement park that you haven't been able to access. For the whole of Part 4 or something. Yeah,
maybe you could have something like that. Yeah, that the diamond ring ends up being the thing that has to be destroyed. It doesn't just blow up when you pull it off Elaine's finger. You have to, or maybe you have to use the ring to destroy LeChuck, or trick LeChuck into accidentally blowing himself up with the ring or something like that.
Yeah, it's just that, like, just have another run at it. Yeah, I mean, I don't absolutely hate the ending. It doesn't ruin the game for me or anything.
No.
I like it. I like aspects of it. I like the, like, sideshow. What do you call it? The alley.
What do they call it? The midway.
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 I kind of like the imagery of that. I like the disgusting guy in the rat suit. I like, it's got like these kind of classic carny kind of character guys.
Lots of influence from
disgusting snow cone guy.
Yeah, lots of influence from Pleasure Island in Pinocchio.
Yeah, absolutely.
As well,
which is like this real awesome imagery in
this
that
kind
movie.
Of hell as an amusement park, kind of.
Hell as an amusement park, and the idea of like kind of sin and vice, which is a very piratey thing.
Yeah,
that kind of you could kind of play up a bit more in that. I do like the way that Big Whoop. I know they call it the Big Whoop, like carnival and stuff, but it's like it's advertised throughout the game.
Yes, I like that as well.
Maybe if you didn't call it that, called it LeChuck's Family Carnival or something. LeChuck's, he's trying to go legit a bit, Godfather 3 style. I don't know, something like that. I mean, I don't want to question this game's creative decisions too much because I love it so much, and I'm not saying my ideas are definitely better, but there might have been a little bit of finessing that could have happened if there'd been a bit more lead time that could have led to, like, I don't know, chef's kiss perfection at the end.
I think the attitude that they had, that Jonathan Ackley and Larry Ahern had in this project, was they were running out of time and money, and they said, people who buy this game, not everyone's going to finish it, so it's more important that the first two
that's very
parts are
much the thing, right?
stronger than the last two.
And arguably, and this was my argument with a lot of people criticizing the end of Return, which is like it doesn't matter how it ends, you know? It's like, did you enjoy the rest of it?
Yeah.
Who cares? Like, who cares that everyone gets arrested at the end of Monty Python's Search for the Holy Grail? Because it's been funny all the way through. And, you know,
Yeah.
do you need that big payoff at the end?
Yeah, and
I would argue that the end of Secret isn't actually that strong either.
No, it's not. And I think that we've spoken about this before, that LeChuck's Revenge, as controversial as the ending can be, probably has the strongest ending out of all of the games in the series, because it is so bizarre and yet fits so perfectly at the same time. I think we've said before that Blood Island, that part 4 is our favourite part of this game, I think.
Yep.
And I'd say parts 1, 2, and 4 are all really good. Part 3,
definitely.
so.
Let's address part 3.
Yeah.
I said in maybe 20 episodes ago or more that I thought that insult sword fighting was improved by the rhyming.
Yeah.
And I liked part 3 of that. I've gone back since in the last few months and played this game a number of times, and it's not. It is a bit of a drag. I think the rhyming thing is funny, and that is a thing that you and I will often like message each other with. Like, we've come up with a funny, fictional, quite possibly very crude response to one of the insults.
Vulgar response.
Very vulgar. That we wouldn't share here, but because the rhyming thing is funny. Going back to Weird Al, if something's funny, it's definitely funnier if it rhymes.
Yeah.
I don't hate the rhyming thing, and it possibly does make it easier, but I hate the kind of grind aspect of the insult sword fighting, and the fact that the game takes a while to throw the fights in your favor, and sometimes you can, like, something's going on in the coding of how this has been scripted or whatever, and it can take a while to start to build up your bank of insults.
And it can feel like a bit of a slog. At
I don't really know how the speedrunners do it, but they like you're not able. I don't believe you're able to fight Rottingham and actually win unless you've got a certain level of cannon. I don't know if the speedrunners have a way around that. Speedrunners also cut out the song, which I feel like is not the full game. Because the song wasn't published in Europe, apparently. The song is like commented out because it doesn't work in other languages.
Yeah, because they would have had to have translated it into so many different languages. Yeah.
That's a whole different discussion about what is and isn't right with speedrunning. But the insult sword fighting, I'm sorry, everyone, if you go back and listen to that episode 2 or whatever it was. I take it back. The insult sword fighting in this game is not an improvement over Secret, which is genius.
Yeah, I think the thinking probably was a lot of people have played Secret of Monkey Island, but we also want to introduce Monkey Island to a new audience. Insult sword fighting is this great idea. Let's do it again. Because for a lot of people, it will be fresh and new. And for other people for whom the gulf of time between 1991 and 1997 was forever, a lifetime,
it was for us.
Yeah. They will go, yay, insult sword fighting's back, you know? So it
or
makes
people who don't know will
sense.
say, this is a novel idea.
Yeah, exactly. It makes sense from that perspective. As you say, the rhyming is fun. The voice performances are so good, and the music's great as well. The decks of the ships look fun.
Yeah, the pirates are fun. Captain Rottingham is a great character.
Yeah, A Pirate I Was Meant to Be is a funny song.
That's fun.
Cannons
like
with
that.
funny names that have fax modem and so on.
And
Given to us, sold to us by Kenny Falmouth, portrayed, of course, by the late Gary Coleman. You know, this stuff is all really funny. And there are a lot of really great elements here. But yeah, I agree with you that part 3 overall, it feels when you're playing through the game now, at the time I was like, yay, more insult sword fighting, rhyming is funny, sailing a ship is fun, and piratey, etc. But now it's a bit like, I just want to get up to Blood Island.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what it feels like to me. It feels like it's a stumbling block kind of thing. Like it's a game extender, a seafood extender,
Yeah.
if you will. It kind of doesn't fit in, but it does. You know when they do the insult arm wrestling at the beginning of Escape?
Yeah.
I remember first playing that, and I was only 13, and I kind of thought, oh no,
Yeah.
like seriously, this is where you're going with this? Like,
Yeah.
I don't hate Escape or anything. I love that game, but I was like, okay, so this is just a thing that's in the series now, like insult thing that you don't even have to learn. And I was like, oh, it's kind of Curse's fault for bringing this back. Come up with something new. Come up with something fresh.
Yeah, and that was something where Curse did establish a bit of a formula for the series. Every game, LeChuck tries to kidnap and marry Elaine, and you do insult sword or some kind of insult fighting and stuff. I guess the insult fighting thing, not so much. It was Escape that really overdid it. The LeChuck and Elaine thing was very overdone, I thought, in Escape and Tales. It was really LeChuck's Revenge kind of tried to do new stuff, and then Curse backpedaled a little bit, I think, on that.
Not too much,
but not. Yeah, just in a few areas.
Yeah. We have to also remember that we thought at the time, this is like what Dom talks about whenever he records dialogue, like it was the last one of a trilogy.
Yes.
Guybrush even says, why does media always come in, like trashy media always come in trilogies?
Yeah, come in threes, yeah. And it had been years since the second game. Dominic Armato thought, there's never going to be another one. And that's what he's thought and what we've all thought every so often. There's never going to be another one.
I definitely thought if there was going to be another one, it was going to look like this.
Yeah.
Because this was kind of pre 3D things were like the N64 was out, but it wasn't. It hadn't taken off so much on the PC at this point.
Yeah. But,
go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say overall, these are. We still enjoyed it at the time when it came out and we were kids, and overall, these are pretty minor things to critique the game about.
It's kind of nitpicking. It's great. It's definitely worth playing. I know that your friend didn't really dig it after he played the first two, which I found really interesting.
Yeah.
And I wonder if it doesn't hold up as well for some reason now.
I think for someone who now played, and especially in the late 2000s, playing the special editions of the first two, Curse looked a bit old and tired because of its lack of HD.
Yeah, it wasn't HD. Even though, at the time, it looked so updated.
And even
though, this will sit alongside. I remember when he was going through them, I was like, he'll enjoy Curse because, it looks like these, but
and even though Secret Special Edition looks pretty bad, Chuck's Revenge Special Edition is decent. And
if you were gonna do a special edition of this, it'd just need a rescan of
a rescan, upscale or something.
Exist.
It doesn't need anything else. It needs the same treatment that Double Fine gave to all of Tim Schafer's games.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
that.
about it.
I don't know. Did they redraw Day of the Tentacle?
I think they did, but I'm not sure.
But faithfully, it was just going over the top of it.
And I know Bill Tiller did redraw one of his backgrounds to kind of say this is what it could look like if it were
what Secret could look like, or what?
No, he redrew the barbershop, I think, from Curse.
Oh, I haven't seen that. God, Bill Tiller.
To kind of say what it could look like.
Yeah,
but they've never done it, probably because people are still
no one cares.
Yeah, to be honest, looking at his suggestion for how it would look, I actually don't think, all these special editions, it's not an improvement over the original art. You'd be better off just rescan if they still have the original drawings or paintings to rescan them. But it's definitely something you could do now, but I almost think it's not necessary. The game looks good enough. Some of the character sprites are a little bit low resolution around the outlines and that kind of thing, but
Yeah.
by
But
and
the
large,
character
it's not
design is
enough of an
nice.
issue. Yeah.
I think it's good. I still
Yeah.
enjoy playing it.
Yes. Yeah.
And in the end, if a thing is good, it doesn't matter if you watch it on VHS on a CRT TV. The movie's still good.
Yeah. Exactly.
Same deal with this. So, same deal with Secret,
Yeah.
It looks like a game that came out in 1990 because it is. But it's
Yeah.
still a good game.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that is probably worth saying about Curse in that respect is even though it wasn't made by the original team, it was made by completely different people, and supposedly Tim Schafer, who was the only one who was still at LucasArts, said to Jonathan Ackley and Larry Ahern, you're not going to be competing with Monkey Island 1 and 2, you're going to be competing with people's memories of Monkey Island 1 and 2. They made a game that was a more than worthy continuation of that series.
Absolutely.
Some creative choices aside, of course it's not the game Ron would have made had he stuck around, but as we know, he didn't stick around and he didn't really have any substantial ideas.
No. And Ron, when he made his Monkey Island 6, was competing with that exact same thing. The memory of what people thought of the games, 30 years ago.
Yeah, and I think they made a game that, as I say, more than lived up to the legacy of the first two games in terms of the sheer quality, especially in terms of production and puzzle design as well. This game has good puzzles in it.
Yeah.
And the interface, I think that full throttle interface, apparently like Ron didn't like it when he played or something, but kind of who cares what he thinks.
I
think
it. I've read criticism of
well.
it.
Overall, I
think it was good to kind of do this discussion post return.
Yes,
because you can kind of really look at like what's the better Monkey Island 3 for better or worse, and it's this.
Yeah, and like Ron said in the lead up to Return, Return's not Monkey Island 3A or anything like that, but
no. But as a sequel to the first two games, which Return very much is.
Yeah, and it was very much marketed as being a follow-up to those first two games. If you were to compare the two, and I said this in my review at the time, this was never meant to be an alternative to Curse, and if Return wasn't, and if it was meant to be, it would have failed because Curse is a better, funnier adventure game than Return to Monkey Island.
I think it's just a better time.
Yeah, and I can completely understand why, maybe it was their first game or whatever, but why so many people have such fond memories of this game, why it's many people's favourite in the series. I can completely understand that. This is an amazing game that I love only fractionally less than the first two in the series.
Almost because you have to, I think.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of something to compare it to, but just because it's not by the original authors, you kind of have to be like, okay, it's not quite up to that standard, but it's not far off.
Yeah, I mean, I think had Ron made Monkey Island 3 in the early 90s, could it have been better than Curse? Yeah, maybe, but he didn't. And
I don't know. I'm not convinced.
Yeah, I'm not convinced either.
And I wouldn't go back if I had my time machine, because I love this game.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't erase it.
No, exactly. And that's the thing, is that if you did have that, you wouldn't have gotten Curse. And Curse is so good and was so important as an adventure game that it's absolutely a landmark installment in the genre and in the series. I wanted to mention that this was the game that killed Warcraft Lord of the Clans, which was the point and click adventure game that Blizzard was developing about Thrall, the orc chieftain, escaping from his human slavery and becoming the leader of the orcs and everything. And then Curse came out and they said, we can't beat this. And then they saw previews for for Grim Fandango and said, we definitely can't beat that. And they canned the project. So
It's a shame because I think you and I probably would have enjoyed that game.
Yeah, but it shows how much LucasArts were absolutely at the top of their game at this point. And I would argue that probably Curse of Monkey Island is the high point of
the zenith of that era.
Of LucasArts as an adventure game production
to be able to beat out Blizzard, which just seems so ridiculous now.
Right? Yeah.
And it's kind of, and to go from that to like the downfall in such a short time.
Yeah.
Grim Fandango is brilliant, but it didn't do well. Escape is pretty good, and it finished it off. And now Monkey Island is kind of like for fans of retro adventure games.
Yeah.
But while Blizzard went from strength to strength, and it's interesting how quickly things changed, and it's so great that kind of it came out like 1997. As I said, that's like when the N64 is really starting to take off.
Yeah.
And the PlayStation, and this is when 3D games and like Ocarina of Time is about to come out.
Yes.
And these things that really finished off Monkey Island and its ilk.
PC gaming of that slower paced.
Yeah.
Kind.
I think we can possibly also blame the Star Wars prequels.
Yeah.
Because that's no, for real, because that's where the Lucas focus went.
Yes.
We got all like the Jar Jar Binks games and stuff, and like the Phantom Menace game is pretty okay, but the adventure game thing ground to a halt. Well, I think it might have had a bit of life left in it.
Yeah, I think you could even see that though by the fact that there was that 6-year gap between Monkey Island 2 and Curse, because it took quite a few years for LucasArts to feel that they'd gotten a return on investment on the first 2 games and thought after a few years of sales, okay, people are still buying these, let's make another one. And
it's interesting looking at that because you and I very much cut off at that time. We're not spending great swathes of time on the internet, but Monkey Island resonated with us. And clearly it did with other people, which is why they decided to make a third game. Yeah. And and now, you have like these big fan communities online, but back then, like what was it that sparked off? Yeah, this is the classic. Monkey Island is the classic adventure game that we put out. Let's do a third one. I don't even know how they came to that conclusion, especially because I know that LeChuck's Revenge didn't do that well.
Yeah, and I think it was because Secret and LeChuck's Revenge were still selling consistently over the years. It was the thing that kind of led them to decide to make another one, and that was why they were released in the Monkey Island Madness set that had the demo for Curse in it as well to kind of drum up interest in the series. And that's why the manual for Curse has stuff about the first 2 games in it to kind of encourage people, go back and buy the first 2 as well,
well, it worked, everyone bought that.
and definitely people, I think, at LucasArts would kind of toying with the commercial potential of Monkey Island at this point as well. As I mentioned at the start, this game was actually sold in Europe as Monkey Island 3 with the number 3 on the box art. And, much like Monkey Island 2 had the 2 on it, which, the British and American releases didn't have. Yeah. And I think Curse sold really well again in Germany, which is why they made Escape a few years later.
Yeah, well, thanks Germany.
Yeah, thanks for loving
keeping
Monkey Island
alive.
so much. Yeah. Did we mention the
wonder what
fact
it
that German is the only other language that Return got a full voice release
We haven't
in?
mentioned it. We have mentioned it now, but
It's
it is
worth
interesting.
mentioning that Curse, because they were really trying to capture this European market. No, they didn't do A Pirate I Was Meant to Be, but this had full voice acting at release in English, German, French, Italian, and Spanish to try to sell it to as much of the European market as they could, because LucasArts had cottoned on to that was where the money was to be made with adventure games and with Monkey Island in particular.
Yeah, people in Europe just more thoughtful, I suppose.
Apparently, Monkey Island seems to appeal, from people said, to various European senses of humour. Seems to be the theory, particularly the German sense of humour, for some reason. Yeah,
because I always thought it would be a very American sense of humour.
yeah. I don't know. Apparently, there's something about the absurdism or something like that I've heard, and the especially the dry wit of the first 2 or 3 games appeals to the German sense of humour, supposedly. I think that's why Monty Python's was always really popular in Germany as well. And they didn't they record dedicated film versions of those sketches in German and stuff like that?
Yeah.
But yeah, there you go. I think it was one of the, if not the first, then one of the first big multilingual projects from like a voice acting perspective,
in all of those languages.
I've heard mixed things about the other language versions.
Well, they're all recast.
Yeah, so obviously, they're all local voice talent. I think I could be wrong, and if anyone in the comments knows, I think the German version is generally considered to be the best. Maybe the German and maybe the Spanish. I think the Italian version is considered to be the worst, and that it has jokes get mistranslated and mangled and stuff like that. Yeah, but
it would be interesting to play it in another language. Not that I would understand it, but I would know what to do anyway. I feel like that's a pretty... I mean, it's an overview. We haven't gotten into the nitty-gritty. What's your favourite moment, just to wrap it up? What's your favourite moment from The Curse of Monkey Island?
It is I reckon it's a toss-up between letting Stan out of the coffin and Charles de Goulash falling through the ceiling to be reunited with Minnie Goodsoup, both on Blood Island.
Mine is in that same scene is when Murray reappears in the Goodsoup family crypt. There's just something so funny about that.
Yeah.
This is going to be so cool.
Yeah.
And then spooking Mort to let you out. I don't know, that whole sequence for some reason very much resonates with you and I.
Yeah.
The spooky comedy crypt and the tragic story of Minnie Goodsoup.
Yeah.
I think it's as good as Monkey Island gets, really. That stuff.
Yeah.
And the LeChuck kind of retro do-over aside, you could have had a different pirate. It didn't have to be LeChuck. That was the one that wronged Minnie. It's great. It's great stuff that kind of is fresh in the series and doesn't rely on anything previously or not trying to, as you say, do Anakin built C-3PO. It's it's just like new stuff. It's new, funny, interesting, thought-provoking, spooky, tonally consistent, nice stuff. Yeah. That'd be my takeaway. You happy with that?
Yeah, I think if anyone wants to hear more details, especially about our thoughts on Part 4, we do have a dedicated episode all about Part 4, which I think is pretty good. I think our dedicated episode on Part 2 wasn't that good, but...
No, but
definitely, I think our part 4...
It was a bit of a list, a bit of a checklist, that one. But
and my microphone wasn't set up properly, so I sound terrible in that one too. But definitely, I think our episode on the bartender, the thieves, his aunt, and her lover is
I'm definitely more passionate
is
about.
one to go back and please, cause there to be it to have been worth my time that I spent hours cutting up game footage from that part of Curse so that
Throw him a bone.
the footage syncs up with the conversation as much as possible. Spent ages doing that, and not that many people have listened to that episode. But
well, just because you did something,
we just I was just surprised that people don't seem to have engaged with us talking about Curse as much as the first two games. So I'd be curious to see if people are interested in us talking about it here.
Well, just what are we going to talk about next? It's nearly the 2-year anniversary in about a month's time of the announcement of Monkey Island 6.
Hmm.
Are we going to talk about that?
Maybe.
Or are we done talking about that? I don't know. What do you want us to talk about? Give us a comment.
Yeah.
There's still plenty there. But we're open to suggestion. We've had some suggestions in the past.
I would like to talk about the fan games, as you've said a number of times.
You think that might be the next one?
Might be. It might be.
I reckon some fan games. I reckon we've definitely got some more races coming up. We've got more games to talk about. We've definitely got plenty of sustenance to talk about with the games that tales and things. So we'll get to that in the future. In the meantime, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for everyone following on Instagram and everything, and liking us on YouTube and subscribing. I think we're approaching 50 subs after 2 years. Not that we're really about that. All we care about is chatting about Monkey Island and letting you listen.
Yeah, really giving you something to listen to in your car, or while you're sitting around eating chips, or on your way to work, or whatever.
What I hope is you listen to it at work. Yeah, and it kind of distracts you from work.
I know I do, and have done plenty of time.
Excellent. There's nothing better to distract yourself than listening to yourself while at work.
Talking about Monkey Island.
Okay, well, thank you for listening to Rubber Chicken with the podcast in the middle. What we believe is the internet's only dedicated podcast to the Monkey Island series of adventure games. I've been Gordon.
And I'm Alistair.
Oh, and one other thing I forgot to mention.
Look behind you! A three-headed monkey!
You've been a wonderful audience. Thank you and good night.